Alrighty, well, hello everybody, and welcome to Friday. Can you believe it's Friday? I certainly can't believe it's Friday. It is so weird to think that it is Friday again. So weird. But anyway, I hope you all are having an amazing evening. I hope you all are ready to sit back, relax, listen again to the tales as we continue on through the Fellowship of the Ring. But before we do that, today's stream is going to be a little bit shorter because we're gonna go raid late about 2 hours to help celebrate his 1 year anniversary for being a VTuber. Yay! Oh, I'm excited for him. And yeah. And then in terms of other announcements, I think tomorrow, now that everything is all set audio wise, we will be ready to go with some more Dragon Age. Probably going to be a bit longer stream, maybe, depending on how things go. And we'll go from there. I'm not quite sure what to expect for that. Doing because my fans are on, because it is very hot tonight, and it's going to be one of those nights I'm going to really not. It's just too hot in an apartment. So yeah, let me grab a book. Let's see. I looked this up. Oh yeah, actually, better that would be my bedroom light since I replaced the light bulb. Better than I expected, but I think it'll work. Trying to not. Okay, there we go. I should probably move the drive somewhere else. That way it's not sitting there. There's not. I'm still working on spacing issues around my desk as I'm trying to attempt this. There we go. So I just want to put my feet up, kind of, since I'm not really playing any games tonight. We're all just kind of chillaxing, having some fun, and enjoying a story. Let me just get a sip of water real quick. There we go. All right. All right. Chapter 2: The Shadow of the Past. The talk did not die down in 99 days. The second disappearance of Mr. Bilbo Baggins was discussed in Hobbiton and indeed all over the Shire for a year and a day, and was remembered much longer than that. It became a fireside story for young hobbits, and eventually Mad Baggins, who used to vanish with a bang and a flash and reappear with bags of jewels and gold, became a favorable character of legend, and lived on long after all the true events were forgotten. But in the meantime, the general opinion in the neighborhood was that Bilbo, who has always been rather cracked, had at last gone quite mad and had run off into the blue. There he undoubtedly fall into a pool or a river and came to a tragic, but hardly untimely end. The blame was mostly laid on Gandalf. If that drafted wizard would leave young Frodo alone, perhaps he'd settle down and grow some hobbit sense, they said. And all to appearance, the wizard did leave Frodo alone, and he did settle down, but the growth of hobbit sense was not very noticeable. Indeed, he was once again beginning to carry on Bilbo's reputation for oddity. He refused to go into mourning, and next year he gave a party in honor of Bilbo's 112th birthday, when he called a 100-weight feast. But that was a short mark, for 20 guests were invited, and there were several meals at which it snowed food and rained drink, as hobbits say. Some people were rather shocked, but Frodo kept up the custom of Bilbo's birthday year after year until they got used to it. He said that he did not think Bilbo was dead. When they said, "Well, where is he then?" He shrugged his shoulders. He lived alone, as Bilbo had done, but he had great many friends among the younger hobbits, mostly descendants of the old Duke. What children Well, had his children been fond of Bilbo and often in and out of Bag End. Volko Bolfin, Fredra Bolger were two of those, but his closest friends were Peregrine Took, usually called Pippin, and Mary Brandybuck, whose real name was Mary Edalc, but that was suddenly remembered. Which is interesting because I don't remember them ever actually introducing him like that in the movies, anyways. But then again, the movies did take some liberties, so that can kind of be forgiven. Frodo went tramping over the Shire with them, but more often he wandered by himself. And to the amazement of sensible folk, he was sometimes seen far from home, walking in the hills and woods under the starlight. Merry and Pippin suspected that he visited the elves at times, as Bilbo had done. At this time, people began to notice that Frodo also showed signs of good preservation. Outwardly, he retained the appearance of a robust and energetic hobbit, just out of his tweens. Some folk have all the luck, they said, but it was not until Frodo approached the usual more sober age of 50 that I began to think of it queer. Frodo himself, after the first shock, found that being his own master and the Mr. Baggins of Bag End was rather pleasant. For some years he was quite happy and did not worry much about the future. But half unknowing to himself, the regret he had not gone with Bilbo was steadily growing. He found himself wondering at times, especially in the autumn, about the wild lands and strange visions of mountains that he had never seen came into his dreams. He began to say to himself, "Perhaps I shall cross the river myself one day." To which the other half of his mind also replied, "Not yet." Hmm, interesting. So he has a little bit of adventure sense, like we all do sometimes. So it went on until his 40s were running out, and his 50th birthday was drawing near. 50 was a number that he felt somehow significant or ominous. It was at any rate that at that age, adventure had suddenly befallen Bilbo. Frodo began to feel restless, and the old path seemed too well trodden. He looked at maps and wondered what lay beyond their edges. Maps in the Shire showed mostly white spaces beyond its borders. He took to wandering further afield and more often by himself, and Merry and his friends watched him anxiously. Often he was seen walking and talking with strange wayfarers and them that began at this time to appear in the Shire. There were rumors of strange things happening in the world outside, and as Gandalf had not that time appeared or sent any message for several years, Frodo gathered all the news he could. Elves who seldom walked into the Shire could now be seen passing westward through the woods in the evening, passing and not returning. But they were leaving Middle Earth and were no longer concerned with its troubles. They were, however, dwarves on the road in usual numbers. The ancient east-west road ran through the Shire to its end of the Grey Haven, and dwarfs always used it on their way to the mines in the Blue Mountains. They were the hobbits' chief source of news in distant parts, if they wanted any. As a rule, dwarfs said little and hobbits asked no more, but Frodo often met strange dwarfs from far countries seeking refuge in the west. They were troubled and had spoken whisper the enemy in the hand of the land of Mordor. That name, the hobbits only knew in legends of the dark past, like a shadow in the background of their memories. But it was ominous and disquieting. It seemed the evil power in Mirkwood had been driven out of the White Council, only to reappear in great strength in the old strongholds of Mordor. The Dark Tower had been rebuilt, it was said, for there the power was spreading far and wide. And far away east and south there were wars and growing fear. Orcs were multiplying again in the mountains. Trolls were abroad, and no longer dull-witted, but cunning and armed with dreadful weapons. and there were murmur hints of creatures more terrible than all of these, but they had no name. Little of all this, of course, reached the ears of the ordinary hobbits, but even the deafest and most stray at home began to hear queer tales, and those were businesses whose businesses took them to the borders to tell strange things. The conversation in the Green Dragon at Baywater one evening in the spring of Frodo's 50th year showed that even the uncomfortable heart of the Shire rumors had heard, though most hobbits still laughed at them. Sam Gamgee was sitting in one corner near the fire, and opposite of them was Ten Sandyman, the miller's son. There were various other rustic hobbits listening to their talk. "Queer things you hear these days, to be sure," said Sam. "Ah," said Ted, "you do if you listen, but I hear fireside tales and children's stories at home, if you want to." "And no doubt you can," retorted Sam, "and I dare say there's more truth in some of them than you reckon. Who's invented these stories anyway? Take dragons now?" "No, thank ye," said Ted. "I won't. I heard all of them when I was a youngster, but no call to believe them now. There's only one dragon in Baywater, and that's green," he said, getting a general laugh. I don't know why I switched accents with him when I started reading for Ted, but we're going to go with it. "All right," said Sam, laughing with the rest. "What about these tree men, these giants, as you might call them? They do say that one bigger than a tree was seen up away beyond the North Moors not long back. Who's they?" "My cousin Hal, for one. He works for Mr. Buffino at Overhill and goes up to the North Fairland for hunting. You saw him." "Says he did, perhaps. Here, Hal's always saying that he's seen things, and maybe he says things that ain't there. But this one was big as an elm tree, and walking 7 yards to a straddle, if it was an inch. Then I bet it wasn't an inch. What he saw was an elm tree, as it was as like as not. But this one was walking, as I tell you, and that ain't no elm tree on North Moors. Then how couldn't have seen one?" said Ted. Here's some laughing and clapping. The audience seemed to think Ted had scored a point. "All the same," said Sam, "you can't deny that the others besides our Hellfast have queer folk crossing Shire. Crossing it, mind you. There are more that turn back at the borders. The Bollingers I've never seen been so busy before. And I've heard tell the elves were moving west. They do say that they're going to the Harbors, not way beyond the White Towers. Wait, that's not. Uh, Sam waved his arms vaguely. Neither he nor any of them knew how far it was to the sea, past the old towers beyond the western borders of the Shire. But it was an old tradition that away over there stood the Grey Havens, from which at times elven ships set sail, never to return. "They're sailing and sailing over the sea. They're going west and leave us," said Sam, half chanting the words, shaking his head sadly and solemnly. But Ted laughed. "Well, this ain't new. If you believe the old tales, and I don't see what it matters to me or you, let them sail. But I warned you haven't seen them doing it nor sail and anyone else in the Shire." "Well, I don't know," said Sam thoughtfully. He believed he had once seen an elf in the woods and still hoped to see more one day. Of all the legends that he had heard in the early years, such fragments of tales and half-remembered stories about the elves knew, as the hobbits knew, had always moved him most deeply. "There are some even in these parts, as far as the fair folk. Get news from them," he said. "There's Mr. Baggins now, that I work for he told me they were sailing. He knows a bit about elves, and Mr. Bilbo knew more. Many's the talk that I had with him when I was a little lad." "Oh, they're both cracked," said Ted. "Leastways, old Bilbo was cracked, and Frodo's cracking. If that's where you got your news from, you'll never want for moonshine. Well, friends, I'm off home. Your good health." He drained his mug and went noisily. Sam sat silent and said no more. He had a good deal to think about. For one thing, there was a lot to do up at Bag End Garden, and he would have a busy day tomorrow if the weather cleared. The grass was growing fast. But Sam had more on his mind than gardening. After a while, he sighed and got up and went out. It was early April, and the sky was now clearing after heavy rain. The sun was down, and a cold, pale evening was quite fading into the night. He walked under home under the evening stars through Hobbiton and up the hill, whistling softly throughout. It was just at this time Gandalf reappeared after his long absence. For 3 years after the party, he had been away. Then he paid Frodo a brief visit, and after taking a good look at him, he went off again. During the next year or two, he turned up very often, coming unexpectedly after dusk, and going off without warning before sunrise. He would not discuss his own business and journeys, and seemed chiefly interested in small news about Frodo's health and doings. Then suddenly, his visits had ceased. It was over 9 years since Frodo had seen or heard of him, and he began to think the old wizard never returned or get enough interest in hobbits. But that evening, as Sam was walking home and twilight was fading, there came the once familiar tap on the sturdy window. Frodo welcomed his old friend with surprise and great delight. He looked at one another. "All well, eh?" said Gandalf. "You look the same as ever, Frodo." "So do you," Frodo replied. Secretly, he thought that Gandalf looked older and more careworn. He pressed him for news of himself and the wide world, and soon they were in deep talk and stayed up far into the night. Next morning, after a late breakfast, the wizard was sitting with Frodo by the open window of the study. A bright fire was on the hearth, but the sun was warm, and the wind was set in the south. Everything looked fresh, and the new green of the spring was shimmering in the fields and the tips of the tree fingers. Gandalf was thinking of a spring nearly 80 years before, when Bilbo had run out of Bagan without a handkerchief. His hair was perhaps whiter than it had been then, and his beard and eyebrows were perhaps longer and heavy, as either it or Frodo himself was in some way reluctant for Gandalf to touch it. Oh, wait, fuck. Oh, longer. Oh, here we go. Sorry, it seems my pages got stuck together and I read the wrong. I skipped ahead. I was wondering why we were reading about the One Ring early. A little too early, if you ask me. His face was more lined with care and wisdom, but his eyes were as bright as ever, and he smoked and blew smoking rings with the same vigor and delight. He was now smoking in silence, for Frodo was sitting still in deep thought, and in the light of the morning he felt the great shadow of the tidings that Gandalf had brought, and last spoke the same. "Last night you began to tell me strange things about my ring, Gandalf," he said, "and that you stopped because you said such matters were best left until daylight. But don't think you should finish now. You say the wing is dangerous. Far more dangerous than I guess. In what way?" "In many ways," answered the wizard. "It is more powerful than I dared think at first. So powerful that in the end it would hardly overcome anyone of mortal race who possessed it. It would possess him. In Eorien, long ago, many elf rings were made, magic rings as you called them, and they were, of course, of various kinds, some more potent and some less. The lesser rings were only essays in crafts, but it was full grown, and to the elf-smiths they were but trifles, and yet still, to my mind, dangers for mortals. But the great rings, the rings of power, they were perilous. A mortal Frodo, who keeps one of the great rings, does not die, but he does not grow or obtain more life. He merely continues until every last minute is weariness, and if he often uses the ring to make him invisible, he fades. He becomes invisible permanently and walks in the twilight under the eye, that dark power that rules the wings. Yes, sooner or later. Later. If he is strong or well meaning to begin with, neither strength nor good purpose will last sooner or later, and the dark power will devour him." "How terrifying," said Frodo. There was another long silence. The sound of Sam Gamgee cutting the lawn came from the garden. "How long have you noticed?" asked Frodo. At length. "How much did Bilbo know?" "Bilbo knew no more than he told you, I'm sure," said Gandalf. "He would certainly never have passed on anything to you. pass on to you anything that he thought would be a danger. Even though I promised to look after you, he thought the ring was very beautiful and very useful at need. And if anything was wrong or queer, it was himself. He said that it was growing on his mind. He was always worrying about it. But he did not suspect the ring itself was to blame, though he had found out that the thing indeed needed looking after, and it did not always seem the same size nor weight. It shrank and expanded in an odd way, and it might suddenly slip off a finger where it had been tight. Yes, he warned me of that in his letter, said Frodo, so I've always kept it on its chain. Very wise, said Gandalf. But as for his long life, Bilbo never connected it with the ring at all. He took all the credit to himself, and he was very proud of it, though he was getting restless and uneasy. Thin and stretched, he said, a sign the ring was getting control. How long have you known this? Asked Frodo again. No, I have known much that only the wise know, Frodo. But if you mean known about this ring, well, I did not know, one might say, that there's a last test to make, but I no longer doubt my guess. When did you begin to guess? He mused, searching back. Oh, when did I first begin to guess? He mused, searching. Let me see. It was the year that the White Council drove the Dark Power from Mirkwood, just before the Battle of the Five Armies. That Bilbo found his ring. A shadow fell on my heart then, though I did not know yet what I feared. I wondered often how Gollum came by a great ring, as plainly as it was. Yeah, at least was clear at first. Then I heard Bilbo's strange story of how he won it, and I could not believe it. When I at last got the truth out of him, I saw at once that he had been trying to put his claim on the ring beyond doubt. Much like Gollum with his birthday present, the lies were too much alike to my comfort. Clearly, the ring had an unwholesome power to set work on its keeper at once. That was the first real warning I had that all was not well. I told Bilbo often that such rings were left unused, but he resented it and soon got angry, and there was nothing else I could do. I could not take it from him without doing even greater harm to him, and I have no right to do so anyway. I can only watch and wait. I might perhaps have consulted Saruman the White, but something always held me back. Who is he? Asked Frodo. I've never heard of him before. Maybe not, answered Gandalf. Hobbits are or were no concern of his. Yet he is great among the wise. He is the chief of my order and the head of the council. His knowledge is deep, but his pride has grown with it, and he takes ill any meddling. The lore of the Elven Rings, the great and small, is his province. He has long studied it, seeking the lost secrets of their making. But when the rings were debated in the council, all they had to reveal with us was his ring lore. Told against my fears, so my doubts slipped. But uneasy, still I watched and waited. And all seemed well with Bilbo. And years passed. Yes, they passed. And they seemed not to touch him. He showed no sign of aging. The shadow fell on me again. But I said to myself, after all he comes. Comes from a long family on his mother's side. There is time yet. Wait. And I waited. Aizuoshi, how you doing? I waited until the night when he left his house. He said and did things that filled me with such fear that no words of Saruman could allay. I knew at last that something dark and deadly was at work, and I have spent most of the years since then in finding out the truth of it. There wasn't any permanent harm done, was there? Asked Fëanor anxiously. Frodo anxiously. He would get all right in time, wouldn't he? Hold on. I'm gonna go grab some caffeine. I am yawning way too much and probably am getting very more relaxed than all of you. So I will do a quick BRB and we will be right. I forgot. I don't have a quick BRB thing yet, so let me fix that real quick. All right, so you're probably going to see how this all works. All right, I don't have a command for this yet. Yeah, that's fine. Healy, transform. Sweet. No, I want you to. Source of it. There we go. Sorry about that. Now we are all set. Oh, right. I need to and lock it. Actually, let's lock all of them too, just to be on the safe side as well. Yep, sorry about that. Just need a little bit of caffeine to kind of help with the yawning. I don't know why. It's weird. All right. Let me get comfortable real quick again. And then we will continue on. Okay, a little bit closer. That. Oh no. All right, no, we're good. Maybe. I'll fix that later. These USB lights. Where am I? He would get all right in time, wouldn't he? Be able to rest in peace, I mean. He felt better at once, said Gandalf, but there is only one power in this world that knows all about the rings and their effects. As far as I know, there is no power in the world that knows all about hobbits. Among the wise I am, the only one who goes in for hobbit lore, an obscure branch of knowledge. But lots of surprises, soft as brothers they can be, yet sometimes as tough as old tree roots. I think it likely that some would resist the rings far longer than most of the wise would believe. I don't think you need to worry about Bilbo. Of course, he possessed the ring for many years and used it, so it might take a long while for the influence to wear off. But it was safe from him to see it again for an instant, otherwise he might have lived on for years quite happy. Just stop as he was when he parted with it. For he gave it up in the end, on his own accord. An important point. No, I was not troubled to hear about dear Bilbo anymore, once he had let the thing go. It is for you that I feel responsible. Ever since Bilbo had left, I have been deeply concerned about you. But all those charming, absurd, helpless hobbits. It would be a grievous blow to the world if the Dark Power overcame the Shire. If all your kind, jolly, stupid Bulgars, Holmblors, Bulfins, Bracegirdles, and the rest, not to mention the ridiculous Bagginsons, became enslaved. Frodo shuddered. But why should we be, he asked. And why should he want to make such slaves? To tell you the truth, said Gandalf, I believe that here art thou, mark you. Is that really how that is spelled? Huh. I've always heard here art thou in like phrases and whatnot, but I've never seen it spelled. And now I'm looking at its spelling, and I'm like, interesting. I didn't realize that's how it was spelled. Maybe because I'm trying to spell it based on how it sounds. So here art thou. I didn't, or is it here? Yeah, it's here. Or Hirto, or is it Hitro? Things to research later. Then you should be thankful, but your safety has passed. He does not need you. He has many more useful servants, but he won't forget you. And hobbits, as miserable slaves, will please him far more than hobbits happy and free. There is such a thing as malice and revenge. Revenge, said Frodo. Revenge for what? I still don't understand. What's this got to do with Bilbo and myself and our ring? It has everything to do with it, said Gandalf. You do not know the real peril yet, but you shall. Shall. But you shall. I was not sure of it myself when I was last here, but the time has come to speak. Give me the ring for a moment. Frodo took it from his breeches pocket, where it had been clasped to a chain and hung from his belt. He unfastened it and handed it slowly to the wizard. It suddenly felt heavy, as either if it or Frodo himself was somewhat reluctant for Gandalf to touch it. Gandalf held it up. It looked up more pure and solid gold. Can you see any markings on it? He asked. No, said Frodo. There were none. It was quite plain, and never saw a scratch or sign of wear. Well, then look. To Frodo's astonishment and distress, the wizard threw it suddenly into the middle of the growing fire. Frodo gave a cry and groped for the tongs, but Gandalf held him back. Wait, he said in a commanding voice, giving Frodo a quick look from under his bristling brows. No apparent change had came over the ring, After a while, Gandalf got up, closed the shutters outside the window, and drew up the curtains. The room became dark and silent. Through the crack of Sam's shears, now nearer to the window, could still be heard faintly from the garden. For a moment, the wizard stood looking at the fire. Then he stopped and removed the ring to the hearth with the tongs. And once it had been picked up, Frodo gasped. "It's quite cool," said Gandalf. "Take it, Frodo." Frodo received it in his shrinking palm. It had seemed to become thicker and heavier than ever. "Hold it up and look closely." As Frodo did so, he saw a few lines, finer than the finest pen strokes, running through the ring. Outside and inside, lines of fire that seemed to form letters of flowing script. They shone pierced by yet a remote grip in the dark. I can't read the fairy letters," said Frodo, in a quivering voice. "No, but I can. The letters are Elvish, of an ancient mode, but the language is that of Mordor, which I shall not utter here. But in this common tongue it is said, close enough: one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in darkness bind them." It was only two lines of a verse well known in elven lore. The 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in the Hall of Stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne. In the land of Mordor where shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in darkness bind them. In the land of Mordor where shadows lie. He paused, then said slowly in a deep voice, "This is the Master Ring, the 1 ring to rule them all. This is the 1 ring that he had lost many years ago, to a great weakness of his power. He greatly desires it, but he must not get it." Frodo sat silent and motionless. Fear seemed to stretch out a vast land, like a dark cloud rising in the east, looming up to engulf him. This ring, how on earth did it come to me?" "Ah, that is a very long story. The beginnings lie in the Black Years, which only lore masters now remember. And if I were to tell you that tale, we should be still sitting here when spring has passed into winter. But last night I told you of Saruman the Great, the Dark Lord. The rumors that you have heard are true. He has indeed risen again, and left his hold in Mirkwood, and returned to his ancient fastness in the Dark Tower of Mordor. That name even you hobbits have heard of, like a shadow on the borders of old stories. Always after defeat and respite, the shadow takes another shape and grows again." "I wish it need not have happened in my time," said Frodo. "So do I," said Gandalf, "and so do all who live to see such things. But it is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given. And already, Frodo, our time is beginning to look black. The enemy is fast coming very strong. His plans are far from ripe, and I think, but they are ripening. We shall be hard put to it. We should be very hard put to it, and even if we're not from this dreadful place, the enemy still lacks one thing to give him the strength and knowledge to be all in resistance, break the last defenses, and cover all lands in the second darkness. He lacks the One Ring. 3, fairest of all the elf lords hid from him, and his hand never touched them or sullied them. 7, the dwarf kings possessed, but 3 he recovered, and the others dragons had consumed. 9 he gave to mortal men, proud and great, so ensnared them long ago they fell under the dominion of the One Ring. They became ring wraiths, shadows under his great shadow, his most terrifying servants long ago. It is many a year since the 9 I walked abroad, yet who knows, as the shadow grows once more, they too may walk again. But come, we shall not speak of such things, even in the morning of the Shire. So it is now the 9 he has gathered to himself, and 7 also, or else they are destroyed. 3 were hidden still, but they are no longer trouble him. He still needs the one, for he made the ring himself. It is his, and he let a great part of his own former power to pass onto it, so that he could rule all others. If he recovers it, then he shall command them all again, wherever they be, even the three, although all that has been wrought with them will be laid bare, and he will be stronger than ever. And this is dreadful, chanced Frodo. He believed that the one has perished, and the elves have destroyed it, as it should have been. But he knows now that it has not perished, and that it has been found. So he is seeking it. Seeking it. And all his thoughts are bent on it. It is his great hope, and our greatest fear. Why wasn't it destroyed? Cried Frodo. And how did the enemy ever come to lose it if he was so strong and so precious to him? He clutched the ring with his hand, as if he suddenly saw Dark Findle stretching out to grasp it. It was taken from him, said Gandalf. The strength of the elves to resist him was greater long ago, and not all men were estranged from them. The men of Westerness came to their aid. That is a chapter of ancient history, which might be good to recall, for there was sorrow then too, and getting dark, and gathering dark, but great valor and great deeds that were not wholly vain. One day, perhaps, I will tell you all the tale, and you shall hear it told fully, one by who knows it best. But for the moment, since most of you all know this, how this thing came to you, and that will be tale enough. That is all I will say. It was Galadriel. Right. Gilgalad. Yeah, Gilgalad, Elven King, who entered of Westerness, who overthrew Sauron, through themselves perished the deed. And Isildur Elrond's son cut off the ring of Sauron's hand, and took it for his own. Then Sauron was vanquished, and his spirit fled and was hidden for many years, until his shadow took shape again in Mirkwood. But the ring was lost. It fell into the great river Alden and vanished, for Isildur was marching north along the east banks of the river, near Gillidan Fields. He was waylaid by orcs of the mountains. Goblins! I feel like they keep forgetting that there are goblins in the mountains. He leapt into the rivers, but the ring slipped off from his finger as he swam, and the orcs saw him and killed him with arrows. Gandalf paused. And there in the dark pools amongst the Gillidan fields, she said, the ring passed into knowledge and legend. And even so, of its history it is known only to few, and the council of the wise would discover no more. But at last I carry of the story, I think. Long ago, long after, but still very long ago, there lived by the banks of the great river, on the edge of the Wilderlands, a clever-handed and quite-footed little people. I guess they were of hobbit kind, akin to their fathers or fathers of the stores, for they loved the river, often swam in it or made little boats of reeds. There was among them a family of high repute, for it was large and wealthier than most, and it was ruled by a godmother of the folk, stern, wise, and old in lore, such as they had. The most inquisitive and curious-minded of the family was called Smeagol. He was interested in roots in the beginnings. He dived down deep in the pools. He burrowed under the trees and growing plants, and he tunneled into the green mounds and ceased to look up at the hilltops, or the leaves of the trees, or the flowers opening in the air, for his head and eyes were downward. He had a friend called Deagle, of similar sort, sharpened eyes, but not so quick and strong. On a time they took a boat and went to the Gillidan fields, where were great beds of iris and flowering reeds, There Smeagol got out and went nosing out of the banks, but Deagle sat in the boat and fished. Suddenly, a great fish took his hook. Before he knew where he was dragged out and drowned into the water at the bottom. Then he let go of his line, for he thought he saw something shining in the riverbed, and holding his breath, he grabbed it. Then he came up spluttering with weeds in his hair and a handful of mud. He swam to the bank, and behold, when he washed away the mud, there in his hand lay a beautiful golden ring. It shone and glittered in the sun, so that his heart was glad. But Smeagol had been watching him from behind a tree. As Deagle gloated over the ring, Smeagol came softly behind. "Give that to us, Deagle, my love," said Smeagol over his friend's shoulder. "Why?" "Because it's my birthday, my love, and I want it," said Smeagol. "I don't care. I've given you a present already. More than I can before, and I found this, and I'm going to keep it." "Oh, are you indeed, my love?" said Smeagol, and he caught Deagle by the throat and strangled him, because the ring looked so bright and beautiful. Then he put the ring on his finger. No one ever found out what became of Deagle. He was murdered far from home, and his body was cunningly hidden. But Smeagol returned home alone, and he found that none of his family could see him when he was wearing the ring. He was very pleased with his discovery and concealed it, and he used it to find out secrets, and he put his knowledge to crooked and malicious use. He became sharp-eyed and keen-eared for all that was hurtful. The ring had given them power according to his nature. It is not to be wondered that he became very unpopular and was shunned, when visible by all his relations. They kicked him, and he bit their feet. He took to thieving and going to muttering himself, gurgling in his throat, so they called him Gollum and cursed him, and told him to go far away, and his grandmother, desiring peace, expelled him from the family and turned him out of her hole. He was wandering in lowliness, weeping a little from the hardness of the world, as he journeyed upriver, till he came to a stream that flowed down from the mountains, and he went that way. He caught fish deep in pools with invisible fingers and ate them raw. One day it was very hot, and as he was bending over a pool, he felt a burning on his back, on his head. And a dazzling light from the water pained his eyes. He wondered at it, for he had almost forgotten about the sun. Then, for the last time, he looked up and shook his fist at her. But as he lowered his eyes, he saw far ahead the tops of the misty mountains, out of which the stream came. He thought suddenly, "It would be cool and shady under those mountains. The sun could not watch me there, and the roots from the mountains could be roots indeed. There must be secrets buried there that have not been discovered since the beginning." So he journeyed by night up into the highlands, and he found himself a little cave, out of which the little dark stream ran. And he wormed his way up like a maggot into the heart of the hills and vanished out of knowledge. The ring went into the shadows with him, and even the Maker, with his power, had begun to grow again, and could learn nothing of it. "Gollum," said Frodo, "Gollum, do you mean this is the very Gollum creature that Bilbo met? How loathsome." "I think it is a sad tale," said the wizard. It might not. It might have happened to others, even to some hobbits that I have known." "I can't believe Gollum was connected with hobbits, however distantly," said Frodo with some heat. "What an abomination, notion." "It is true all the same," replied Gandalf. "About their origins at any rate, I know more than hobbits do themselves. Even Bilbo's story suggests the kinship. There was a great deal in the background of their minds, and memories were similar. They understood one another remarkably well, very much better than a hobbit would say, a dwarf or an orc, or even an elf. Think of the riddles they both knew, for one thing. Yes, though other folk besides hobbits ask riddles, and much of the same sorts. And hobbits don't cheat. Gollum meant to cheat all the time. He was just trying to put poor Bilbo off his guard. And I dare say that would use his wickedness to start a game which might end in providing him with an easy victim. But if he lost, he would not hurt him. Only too true, I fear, said Gandalf. But there was something else in it. I think which you don't know yet. Even Gollum was not wholly ruined. He proved tougher than any of those of the wise would have guessed. As a hobbit might be. There was a little corner of his mind that was still his own, and light came through it, as though a chink in the dark. Light came out of the past. It's actually pleasant, I think, to hear kindly voices again, bringing up some memories of wind and trees, and suns and grass, and such forgotten things. But that, of course, would only make the evil part of him angrier in the end, unless it would be conquered, unless it could be cured. Gandalf sighed. Alas, there is little hope for that for him. Yet, not no hope. No. Not though he possessed the ring long ago, so long, almost as far back as he remembered, for it was long since he had worn it since, and the black darkness it was suddenly needed. Certainly he never faded, but is thin, tough still. He is thin and tough still. But the thing was eating up his mind, of course, and the torment had become unbearable. All the great secrets in the mountain had turned out to be empty, just empty night. And there was nothing more to find out, nothing worth doing, only a nasty furtive of eating and resortful remembering. He was altogether wretched, and he hated the dark. He hated the light more. He hated everything, and the ring most of all. What do you mean? Said Frodo. Surely the ring was his precious, and the only thing he cared for. But if he hated it, why didn't he get rid of it, or go away, or leave it? You ought to begin to understand, Frodo. After all, you've heard of it. He hated it, and loved it, as he hated and loved himself. For he could not get rid of it. He had no will left in that matter. A ring of power looks after itself, Frodo. It may slip off treacherously, but its keeper never abandons it. And most he plays with the idea of handling it to someone he cares, and that only at early stage. When he begins to grip, as far as I know, Bilbo alone in history has ever gone beyond playing and really done it. He needed all my help too, and even so, he would never have just forsaken it or cast it aside. It was not Gollum, Frodo, but the ring itself that decides. The ring left him. What, just in time to meet Bilbo? Wouldn't an orc have suited better? It's no laughing matter, said Gandalf, not for you. It's the strangest event in the whole history of the ring so far. Bilbo's arrival just at that time, and putting his hand on it blindly in the dark. There is more than one ring of power, one power at work, Frodo. The ring was trying to get back to his master. It had slipped from Ezidil's hand and betrayed him. Then, when a chance came, caught poor Deagle, and he was murdered. And after that, Gollum, and it had devoured him. It could make no further use of him. He was too small and mean, and as long as it stayed with him, he would never leave his pools again. So now, when its master was awake once more, and sending out his dark thoughts from Mirkwood, it abandoned Gollum, only to be picked up by the most unlikely person imaginable, Bilbo from the Shire. Behold, that was something else at work, beyond any design of the ring maker. I can put it no plainer than that, saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and not by its maker. In which case, you are also meant to have it. And that may be encouraging thought. It is not, said Frodo, though I'm not sure I understand you. But how have you learned about all this in the ring, about Gollum? Do you really know it all, or are you just guessing still? Gandalf looked at Frodo, and his eyes glinted. I knew much, and I have learned much, he answered. But I'm not going to give an account of all my doings to you. The history of Eldon and Isildur and the One Ring is known to all the wise. Your ring is shown to be the One Ring by the fire writing alone, apart from all other evidence. And when did you discover that? Asked Frodo, interrupting. Just now in this room, of course, answered the wizard sharply. But I expected to find it, and now I have come back from dark journeys and long searches to make the final test. It is the last proof, and all is now only clear, marking out Gollum's part, and fitting into the gap of the history required some thought. I may have started with guessing about Gollum, but now I am not guessing now. I know I have seen him. You have seen Gollum? Exclaimed Frodo in amazement. Yes. The obvious thing to do, of course, if one could. I tried long ago, but I have managed at last. Then what about Bilbo after Bilbo escaped, and do you not know? Not so clearly. What I have told you is that Gollum was willing to tell, though not, of course, in the way I have reported it. Gollum is a liar, and you have to sift his words, for instance. He called the ring his birthday present, and he stuck to that. He said it came to him from his grandmother, who had lots of beautiful things of that kind. A ridiculous story. I have no doubt that Smeagol's grandmother was a matriarch, a great person, who had lots of beautiful things of that kind. A ridiculous story. Oh, wait, a great person in her way, but talk of her possessing many elven rings was absurd. And as for giving them away, it was a lie, but a lie with a grain of truth. The murder of Deagle haunted Gollum, and he had made up a defiance, repeating it to his precious over and over again, as he gnawed bones in the dark until he almost believed it. It was his birthday. Deagle ought to have given the ring to him. It obviously turned out to be a present. It was his birthday present, and so on and so on. I endured him as long as I could, but the truth was desperately important. In the end, I had to be harsh. I had to put the fear of fire in him and wring out the true story out of him, bit by bit, together with much sniveling and snarling. He thought he was misunderstood and ill-used, but when he last told me his story, as far in the end of the riddle game and Bilbo's escape, he would not say more except in dark hints. Some of their fear was on him, greater than mine. He muttered that he was going to get his own back. People would see if he would stand being kicked and driven out of a hole and robbed. Gollum had good friends now. Good friends, very strong. That would help him. Baggins would pay for it. That was his chief thought. He hated Bilbo and cursed his name. What is more, he knew where he come from. How did he find out? Well, as for the name, Bilbo very foolishly told Gollum himself. After that, it would not be difficult to discover his country once Gollum came out. Ah, yes, he came out. His longing for the ring proved stronger than his fear of the orcs. Goblins! You see, though still beyond the desire of it, the ring was no longer devouring him. He began to revive a little. He felt old and terribly old, yet less timid, and he was mortally hungry. The light of the sun and moon he still feared, and hated, and always will. I think, but he was cunning, and found he could hide from the daylight and the moonshine, to make his way swiftly and soft by dead of night with his pale cold eyes, and catch small frightened unaware things. He grew stronger and bolder with new food and new air. He found his way into Mirkwood, as no one would expect. Is that where you found him? Asked Frodo. I saw him there, answered Gandalf. But before that he wandered far, following Bilbo's trail. It was difficult to learn anything from him for certain, for his talk was constantly interrupted by curses and threats. What if it had got in its pockets? He said. I wouldn't say no precious little cheat. Not a fair question. It cheated first, it did. It broke the rules. We have to have squeezed it. Yes, precious. We will, precious. That is a sample of his talk. I don't suppose you want any more. I had weary days of it, but from hints dropped among the snarls, I gathered that his paddling feet had taken him at at last to Esgaroth, into the streets of Dale, listening secretly and peering. Well, the news of the great event went far and wide in Winterland, and many had heard Bilbo's name and knew where he had come from. We made no secret of our return journey to his home in the west. Gollum's sharp ears would soon learn that he wanted. Why didn't he track Bilbo further? Asked Frodo. Why didn't he come to the Shire? Ah, said Gandalf. Now we come to it. I think Gollum tried to. He set out and came back westward, as far as the Great River, but then he turned aside. He was daunted by the distance, I'm sure. No. Something else drew him away, so my friends think. Those that hunted him for sure. The Wood Elves tracked him first, an easy task for them. His trail was still fresh then, though Mirkwood had... Through Mirkwood and back it led them. And though they never caught him, the wood was full of rumor of him, dreadful tales even among the beasts and birds. The woodsman said that there was some new terror abroad, a ghost that drank blood. It climbed trees and found nets. Climbed trees to find nests. It crept to holes to find young. It slipped through the windows to find cradles. But at the western edge of Mirkwood, the trail turned away. It wandered off southward and past out the woodland and clan and was lost. And then I made a great mistake. Yes, Frodo, not the first, though, I fear. Many proved the worst. I let the matter be. I let him go, for I had much else to think of for that time. And I still trusted the lore of Saruman. Well, that was years ago. I said it pays a price since many dark and dangerous days. The trail was long cold when I took it up again after Bilbo left there, and my search would have been in vain. But for the help I had a friend, Aragorn, the greatest traveler and huntsman of this age of the world. Together we sought out for Gollum, down the whole length of the Widerland, and without hope and without success. But at last, when I had given up the chance and turned to other parts, Gollum was found. My friend returned out of the great perils, bringing the miserable creature with him. What he had been doing he would not say. He only wept and called us cruel, with many a Gollum in his throat. And we pressed him when he whined and cringed and rubbed his long hands, licking his fingers as they had pained him, as if he remembered some old torture. But I am afraid there is little no possible doubt. He had made his slow sneaking way step by step, mile by mile, south down at last to the land of Mordor. A very heavy silence fell in the room. Frodo could hear his heart beating. Even outside, everything seemed still. No found sound of Sam's shears could still be heard. Yes, to Mordor, said Gandalf. Alas, Mordor draws all wicked things, and the dark powers bending all its will to gather them there. The ring of the enemy would leave its mark too, leaving open to the summons. All the forks were whispering then of new shadows in the south, and its hatred of the west. Those were his fine new friends, who would help find with his revenge. Wretched fool, in that land he would learn too much too much for his comfort, and sooner or later, as he looked in pride onto the borders, he would be caught and taken for examination. That was the way of it, I fear. When he was found, he had only been there long. He was on his way back, on some errand of mischief, but that does not matter much now. His worst mischief was done. Yes, alas, through him the enemy has learned that the one has been found again. He knows where Isildur fell. He knows where Gollum found his ring. He knows it is a great ring, for it gave long life. He knows that it is not the one of the three, for they have been lost. Had never been lost, and they endure no evil. He knows it is not one of the 7 or the 9, for they are accounted for. He knows it is the one, and at last he heard, I think, of the hobbits of the Shire. The Shire, he may be seeking for it now, even if he already found it where it lies. Indeed, Frodo, I fear that he may think that the long unnoticed name of Baggins has become important. This is terrible, cried Frodo. Far worse than I imagined from your hints and warnings. Oh, Gandalf, best of friends, what am I to do? From now on, I'm really afraid. What do I do? But what a pity that Bilbo did not stab the vile creature when he had a chance. Pity? It was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy not to strike without need. And he had been well rewarded, Frodo. Be sure they took so little hurt from the evil and escaped in the end, because he began ownership of the ring. And so, with pity. I am sorry, said Frodo, but I am frightened, and I do not feel any pity for Gollum. You have not seen him, said Gandalf. Gandalf broke in. No, and I don't want to, said Frodo. I can't understand you. Do you mean to say that you and the elves let him live after all these horrible deeds? At any rate, as bad as an orc or just an enemy, he deserves death. Deserves it. I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be able to deal out death and judgment. For even the very wise cannot see all ends. I am not much hope that Gollum can be cured before the end, before he dies, but there is a chance of it. He is bound with the same. He is bound up with the fate of the ring. My heart tells me he has some part yet to play, for good or ill, before the end. And when that time comes, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many, yours at least. In any case, we did not kill him. He is very old and wretched. The Wood Elves have have him in prison, but they treat him with such kindness as they can find in their hearts. All the same, said Frodo, even if Bilbo could not kill Gollum, I wish he had not kept the ring. I wish he had never found it, and that I had not gotten it. Why did you let me keep it? Why didn't you make me throw it away or destroy it? Let me? Let you? Make you? Said the wizard. Haven't you been listening to all they have said? You're not thinking of what you're saying. But as for throwing it away, it was obviously wrong. These rings have a way of being found. In evil hands, it might have done great evil. Worst of all, it might have fallen in the hands of the enemy. Indeed, it certainly would, for this is the one, and he is exerting all of his power to find it and draw it to himself. Of course, my dear Frodo, it is dangerous for you, and that has troubled me deeply. But there is so much at stake that I wish to take some risk. Though, even when I was far away, there has never been a day when the Shire has not been guarded by watchful eyes. As long as you never used it, I do not think the ring would have any lasting effects on you. Not for evil, not for any rate, and not for a long time. And you must remember that 9 years ago, when I last saw you, I still knew little for certain. But why not destroy it? As you say, it should have been long ago, cried Frodo. If you warned me or not sent a message, I would have done it right away. All right. I'm gonna get up. Get a little stretch it. Oh, I really use the restroom real quick and then we'll do this again. Right. Zzz. Would you? And how would you do that? Have you ever tried? No, but I suppose no one can hammer it or melt it. Try. Try now. Frodo drew the ring out of his pocket again and looked at it. Now it appeared plain and smooth, without a mark or device that he could see. The gold looked very fair and pure, and Frodo thought how rich and beautiful it was color, and how perfect it was roundness. It was an admirable thing and altogether precious. When he took it out, he had intended to fling it from him into the hottest part of the fire, but he found now that he could not do so, not without a great struggle. He weighed the ring in his hand, hesitating, forcing himself to remember all that Gandalf had told him, and then with no an effort of will he made a movement as if to cast it away, but he found that he put it back in his pocket. Gandalf laughed grimly. See? Already you too. Frodo cannot easily let it go, nor will to damage it. And I could not make you except by force, for which would break your mind. But as for breaking the ring, force is useless. Even if you took it and struck it with a heavy sledgehammer, it would not make no dent in it. It cannot be unmade by your hands, or by mine. Your small fire, of course, would not melt into even ordinary gold. This ring has already passed through it unscathed and unheeded, but there is no such ford in this shire that could change it. Not even the anvils of the furnaces of the dwarfs could do it. It is said that dragon fire could melt and consume the rings of power, but there is not any dragon left on earth in which old fire is hot enough. Nor nor was there ever a dragon, not even Anklor the Black, who could ever harm the one ring, the ruling ring, for that was made by Sauron himself. The only way, there is only one way, to find the cracks of doom and the depths of Orodruin, the Fire Mountain, and cast it to the ring in there. If you really wish to destroy it, to put it beyond the grasp of the enemy forever. I do really wish to destroy it, cried Frodo. Or, well, to have it destroyed. I am not made for perilous quests. I wish I had never seen the ring. Why did it come to me? Why was I chosen? Such questions cannot be answered, said Gandalf. You may be sure that it is not the merit of others you do not possess. Not for power or wisdom, at any rate. But you have chosen, and you must therefore use such strength and heart and wits as you have. But I have so little of any of these things. You are wise and powerful. Will you not take the ring? No, said Gandalf, springing to his feet. With that power, I should have power too great and too terrible, and over me the ring would gain power still greater and more deadly. His flashed, and his face was lit with a fire within. Do not tempt me, for I do not wish to become like the Dark Lord himself. Yet the way of the ring, too, my heart is to pity for weakness, and desire for strength to do good. Do not tempt me. I dare not take it, not even to keep it safe and unused. The wish to wield it would be too great for my strength. I shall have need of it. Great perils lie before me. He went to the window and drew aside the curtain and the shutters. Sunlight streamed back again into the curtain. Sam passed along the path outside, whistling. And now, said the wizard, turning back to Frodo, the decision lies with you, but I will always help you. He set his hand on Frodo's shoulder. I will help you bear this burden, as long as you bear it. But we must do something soon. The enemy is moving. There was a long silence. Gandalf sat down again and puffed his pipe. And at last in thought his eyes seemed closed, but under the lids he was watching Frodo intently. Frodo gazed fixedly at the end embers of the hearth until they had filled all his vision. He seemed to be looking down at the refined wells of fire. He was thinking of the fabled cracks of doom and the terror of the Furry Mountain. Well, said Gandalf at last, what are you thinking about? Have you decided what to do? No, answered Frodo, coming back to himself out of the darkness, and finding to his surprise that it was not dark. and that out of the window he could not see sunlight. He could see sunlight in the garden. Or perhaps yes. As far as I understand what you have said, I suppose I must keep the ring and guard it. At least for the present, whatever it may be. Do to me, whatever it may do. It will be slow, slow to evil, even if you kept it with that purpose, said Gandalf. I hope so, said Frodo. But I hope that we may find some other better keeper soon. But in the meanwhile, it seems I am a danger to all that live here, that live near me. I cannot keep the ring and stay here. I had to leave back again. Leave the Shire, leave everything, and go away, he sighed. I should like to save the Shire, if I could, though. Oh, wait, no, that's his. I should like to save the Shire, though, if I could. Though, many times when I thought the inhabitants, too, are stupid dull for words. Yep, dull for words, and felt the earthquake or invasion of dragons might be good for them. But I don't feel like that now. I feel as long as the Shire lies behind and safe and comfortable, I shall be wondering more bearable. I should know that somewhere there is a firm foothold, even if my feet cannot stand there again. Of course, I have sometimes thought of going away, but I imagine them as kind of a holiday, a series of adventures like Bilbo, or better, ending in peace. But this would be exile, a flight from danger into danger, drawn after me. And I suppose I must go alone, even if I am to do that to save Shire. But I feel very small and very uprooted. Well, desperate. The enemy is so terrible, is so strong and terrible. He did not tell Gandalf, but as he was speaking, a great desire to follow Bilbo flamed up in his heart. To follow Bilbo, even perhaps to find him again. It was so strong that it overcame his fear, and he almost ran out there and down the road without his hat, as Bilbo had done a similar moment long ago. Dear Frodo, exclaimed Gandalf, hobbits really are amazing creatures. As I have said before, you can learn all that there is to know about their ways in a month, and yet, after 100 years, they still surprise you at a pinch. I hardly expected to get an answer, not even from you. But Bilbo made no mistake in choosing his heir, though he little thought how important it would prove. I'm afraid you're right. The ring will not be able to stay hidden in the Shire much longer, and for your sake, as well as others, you'll have to go and leave the name Baggins behind you. That name will not be safe. And will not be safe to have. Outside the Shire or in the wild, I will give you a traveling name now. When you go, I'll go as Mr. Underhill. But I do not think you need to go alone. Not if you know of anyone who you can trust or would be willing to go by your side, and that would be willing to take unknown perils. But if you look for a companion, be careful in choosing, be careful what you say. Even your closest friends. The enemy has spies and many ways of hearing. Suddenly he stopped as if listening. Frodo became aware that all was quiet inside and outside. Gandalf crept to the side of the window, then with a dart sprang over the sill and thrust his long arm out and downwards. There was a squawk, and up came Samwise Gamgee's curling head, hauled by one ear. Well, bless my beard, said Gandalf. Samwise Gamgee, is it? That what you may be doing? Lord bless you, Mr. Gandalf, sir, said Gandalf. Nothing leastways. I was just trimming the grass border on the window, if you follow me. He picked up his shears and exhibited them as evidence. I don't, said Gandalf grimly. It is time since I last heard the sound of your shears. How long have you been eavesdropping? Eavesdropping, sir? I don't follow you. Begging your pardon, sir. They know eaves at Baghead, and that's a fact. Don't be a fool. What have you heard? And what did you listen? Gandalf's eyes flashed, and his brows struck a little with bristles. Mr. Frodo, sir, cried Sam, quacking. Quacking? It's really hard to tell what that's supposed to be, since the somewhat faded. Don't let him hurt me, sir. Don't let him turn me into anything unnatural. My old dad would take on, so I meant to haunt on my honor, sir. He won't hurt you, said Frodo, hardly able to keep from laughing, although he himself was startled and rather puzzled. He knows as well as I do that you mean no harm, but just you up and answer his question straight away. Well, sir, said Sam, I heard a great deal that I didn't quite understand about an enemy, about rings, about Mr. Bilbo, sir, and dragons and Fire Mountain and elves, sir. I listened but couldn't help myself, if you know what I mean. Lord bless me, sir, I don't know. I do love tales of the sort. And believe him, too, whatever it may say. Elves, sir, I truly love to see them. Could you take me to see elves, sir? Where should I go? Suddenly, Gandalf laughed. Come inside, he shouted, putting out both his arms. He lifted the astonished Sam, shears, grass clippings, and all right through the window, and stood him on the floor. Take you to see the elves, eh? He said, eyeing Sam closely, with a smile flickering on his face. So you heard that Mr. Frodo is going away? I did, sir, and that's why I choked, which you heard seemingly I did not. I tried not to, sir, but it burst out of me. I'm so upset. It can't be helped, Sam, said Frodo sadly. He suddenly realized that flying the Shire, it would mean painful partings and merely saying farewell to all the family's comforts at Bag End. I shall have to go, but here he looked at Sam. If you really care about me, you'll keep that dead secret. See, if you don't bring a word you hear, then I hope Gandalf will turn you into a spotted toad and fill the grass full of snakes. Sam fell to his knees, trembling. Get up, Sam, said Gandalf. I have thought of something better than that, something to shut your mouth and punish you properly for listening. You shall go with Mr. Frodo. Me, sir, said Sam, springing up like a dog on an invited walk. Me go see the elves and all, hooray! He shouted, then burst into tears. Oh, poor Sam, I burst into tears too if a wizard tried to transform me into a spotted toad. Let me get some water. And then let's see how far we can get chapter 3 before 9 o'clock. Actually, a better question is, how long is chapter 3? The index. 925, that's about 40 pages. Let me grab my calculator. Do 125 minus 99. 26 pages? Doable. All right, let's start with chapter 3. Chapter 3. 3 is a company. You ought to go quietly. You ought to go soon, said Gandalf. 2 or 3 weeks had passed, and still Frodo made no sign of getting ready to go. I know, but this is difficult to do both, he objected. If I just vanish like Bilbo, the tales will be all over the Shire in no time. Of course you must vanish. That wouldn't do at all. I said soon, not instantly. If you could think of a way of slipping out of the Shire without its being generally known, it would have been worth little delay, but you must not delay too long. What about the autumn or on after my birthday? Asked Frodo. I think I can probably make arrangements by then. To tell you the truth, he was very reluctant to start. Now that it had come to this point, Bag End seemed more of a desirable residence than it had for years, and he had wanted to savor as much as he could for his last summer in the Shire. When autumn came, he knew that part, or at least of his heart, could not think more kindly of journeying as it already did that last season. He had indeed privately made up his mind to leave the Shire on his 50th birthday. Bilbo's 128th. It seemed somehow the proper day on which to set out and follow him. Follow Bilbo was upmost to his mind, and the one thing that made the thought of leaving bearable. He thought he as little as possible about the ring and where it might lead in the end. He did not tell the others. He did not tell his thoughts to Gandalf, and the wizard would have guessed. It was always difficult to tell. He looked at Frodo and smiled. Very well, he said. I think that'll do, but it must not be any later. I am getting very anxious. In the meantime, do take care, and don't let out any hint of where you are going. And see that Samwise Gamgee does not talk. If he does, I'll turn him into a toad. And as for where I'm going, said Frodo, it would be difficult to give that away. I have no clue of that idea myself. Don't be absurd. I'm not warning you against leaving an address at the post office. But if you leave in the Shire, then it should not be known until you are far away. You must go at least south north, south, west, or east, and the direction shall be not known. I have been taken up with the thought of leaving Bag End and saying farewell. I have never even considered the direction, said Frodo. For where I am to go, and by what I shall steer. What is to be my quest? Bilbo went to find a treasure there and back again, but I go to lose one and not return, as far as I can see. But you cannot see very far, said Gandalf. Neither can I. And it may be your task to find the cracks of doom, but that quest may be for others. I do not know. At any rate, you are not ready to go on the road. Ready for that long road yet. No, indeed, said Frodo. In the meantime, what course am I to take? Towards danger, but not too rashly. Not too straight, answered the wizard. If you want my advice, make for Rivendell. That journey should not prove too perilous, though the road is less easy than it was. It will grow worse as the years fall. Rivendell, said Frodo. Very good, I will go east and make for Rivendell. I'll take Sam to visit the elves. He will be delighted. He spoke lightly, but his heart was moved suddenly with desire to see the house of Elrond on half-elven, and breathe the air of the deep valley where many of the fair folk had dwelt in peace. One of the summer's evening, an astounding piece of news reached the Ivy Bush and Green Dragon. Giants and other portents at the borders of the Shire were forgotten for more important matters. Mr. Frodo was selling Bag End. Indeed, he had already sold it to the Saxonville Baggins. We're a nice bit too, said some. At a bargain price, said others, and there's more likely that Mr. Slobod's the buyer. Otho had died some years before at the ripe, but disappeared at disappointed age of 102. Just why Mr. Frodo was selling me his beautiful hull was more debatable than the price. A few held the theory, supported by the nods and hints at Mr. Baggins himself, that Frodo's money was running out, and he was going to leave Hobbiton and leave a quiet way on the proceedings and the sale in Buckland among his brandy-bugged relations. As for the Saxonville Baggins, as it may be, some added. As far from the Saxonville Baggins as it may be, but so firmly fixed on the notion that measuring wealth of the Baggins at Bag End became the most found, and it's hard to believe, harder than any other reason or unreason that their fancies could digest. To most, it suggested a dark yet unrivaled plot by Gandalf, though he kept himself very quiet and did not go about by day. It was well known that he was hiding up in Bag End, but however a removal might fit in with the design of his wizardry, there is no doubt about the fact Frodo Baggins was going back to Buckland. Yes, I shall be moving in this autumn, he said. Mary a Brandybuck is looking out for a nice little hole for me, or perhaps a small house. As a matter of fact, with Mary's help, he had already chosen and bought the little house in Crick Hollow in the country beyond Bucklebury. To all but Sam, he pretended he was going to settle there permanently. The decision was set out westward and suggested the idea to him for the Buckland was on the western borders of the Shire, as he had lived there in childhood. On his back, Gandalf stayed in the Shire for over 2 months. Then one evening, at the end of June, soon after Frodo's plans had been arranged, he suddenly announced that he was going off again next morning. Only for a short while, I hope, he said, but I am going beyond the southern borders to get some great news. If I can. I have been idle longer than I should. He spoke lightly, but it seemed to Frodo that he looked rather worried. Has anything happened? He asked. Well, no. But I have heard something that has made me anxious, and he needs looking into. I think it necessary, after all, for you to go off at once. I shall come back immediately, or at least send word. In the meanwhile, stick to your plan, but be very careful than ever, especially the ring. Let me impress on you once more. Do not use it. He went off at dawn. I may be back any day, he said. At the very least, I shall come back for the farewell party. I think all you may I think after all you may need my company at the road. At first Frodo was a great deal disturbed, and wondered often what Gandalf would have heard. But as this uneasiness wore off, in the fine weather he forgot his troubles a while. The Shire had seldom been seen in so far as summer, or so rich in autumn. The trees were laden with apples and honey and were dripping in the combs, and the corn was tall and full. Autumn was well under the way before Frodo began to worry about Gandalf again. September was passing, and there was still no news of him. The birthday and the removal drew nearer, and still he did not come, or send word. Bag End began to be busy. Some of Frodo's friends came to stay and help him with the packing. There was Fredegar Bolger and Volkel Bolfun, and of course his special friends Pippin Took and Merry Brandybook. Between them, they turned the whole place upside down. On September 20th, the two cover carts went off to Leyden to Buckland, conveying the furniture and goods that Frodo had not sold to his new home, by the way of the Brandywine Bridge. The next day, Frodo became really anxious and kept constant lookout for Gandalf. Thursday, his birthday morning, dawned far and clear as it had long ago for Bilbo's great party. Still, Gandalf did not appear. In the evening, Frodo gave his farewell feast. It was quite small, just a dinner for himself and his 4 helpers, but he was troubled and felt in no mood for it. The thought that he would soon have to part with his young friends weighed on his heart. He wondered how he would break it to them. The 4 younger hobbits were, however, in high spirits, and the party soon became very cheerful in spite of Gandalf's absence. The dining room was bare except for a table and chairs, but the food was good, and there was food and wine. Oh, good wine, not food wine. That doesn't make sense. I don't know where am I doing food. Good wine. Frodo's wine had not been included in the sale to Saxonville Baggins. Whatever happens to the rest of my stuff when the SBs get their claws on it. At any rate, I have found a good home for this," said Frodo as he drained his glass. It was the last of the drop of the old vineyards. They had sung many songs and talked of many things they had done together. They toasted Bilbo's birthday and drank his health and Frodo together, according to Frodo's custom. Then they went out to sniff the air and glimpse at the stars. Then they went to bed. Frodo's party was over, and Gandalf had not come. The next morning they were busy packing another cart with the remainder of the luggage. Mary took charge of this and drove off with Fatty, that is, Fred Bolger. Someone might get there and warm the house before you arrive, said Mary. We'll see you later, the day after tomorrow, if you don't get sleep on that way. Falco went home after lunch, but Pippin remained behind. Frodo was restless and anxious, listening in vain for the sound of Gandalf. He decided to wait until nightfall. After that, if Gandalf wanted him urgently, he would go to Cricket Hollow, and he might even get there first. For Frodo was getting on foot. His plan for pleasure at a last look at the Shire, as much as many other reason, was to walk from Hobbiton to Bucklebury Ferry, taking it fairly easy. I shall get myself a bit of training too, he said, looking himself in a dusty mirror in the empty hall. He had not done any strenuous walking for a long time, and the reflection looked rather flabby, he thought. After lunch, the Saxonville Baggins against Lobelia and her sandy son Lotho turned up. Much to Frodo's annoyance. Ours at last, said Lobelia, as he stepped inside. It was not polite, nor strictly true, for the sale of Bag End did not take effect till midnight. But Lobelia could perhaps be forgiven. She had been obliged to wait about 77 years, longer for Bag End, they would have hoped for. And she was now 100 years old. Anyway, she had come to see that nothing she had paid for had been carried off, and she wanted the keys. It took a long while to satisfy her, as she had brought a complete inventory with her and went right through it. In the end, she departed with Lothar and the spare key, and the promise for the other key would be left at the Gamgees in Bagshot Row. She snorted and showed plainly what she thought of the Gamgees capable of plundering the little hole during the night. Frodo did not offer her any tea. As you should, Frodo, as you should. He took his own tea with Pippin and Sam Gamgee in the kitchen. It had been officially announced that Samgee was coming to Buckland to do for Mr. Frodo and look for after his garden, an arrangement that was approved by the gaffer, though it did not console him the prospect of Lobelia as his neighbor. One last meal at Bag End, said Frodo, pushing his back at his chair. They left the washing up for Lobelia. Pippin and Sam draped up their 3 packs and piled them in the porch. Pippin went out for a last stroll in the garden. Sam disappeared. The sun went down. Bag End seemed sad and gloomy and disheveled. Frodo wandered round the familiar rooms and saw a light on the sunset fade in the halls and shadow creeping out of the corners. It grew slowly dark indoors. He went out and walked down the gate to the bottom of the path, and then a short way down the hill road. He half expected to see Gandalf come striding up through the dusk. The sky was clear and the stars were growing bright. It's going to be a fine night, he said aloud. That's good for a beginning. I feel like walking. I cannot bear any moment hanging about. I'm going to start, and Gandalf must follow me. He turned to go back and then stopped for heard voices just around the corner by the end of Bagshot. One voice was certainly the gaffer's, the other was strained, somehow unpleasant. He could not make out what he said, but he heard the gaffer's answers, which was rather shrill. The old man seemed to put, No, Mr. Baggins has gone away. He went this morning, and my Sam went with him. Anyway, all his stuff went. Yes, he sold out and he's gone. I'll tell you why. Why none of you your business of yours? Where are you off to? That ain't no secret. He's moved to Buckleberry or some place anyway down yonder. Yes, it is, a tidy way. I've never been so far off. So far myself. They're queer folks in Buckland. No, I cannot give you no message. Good night to you. Footsteps went away from the hill. Frodo wondered vaguely why the fact that they did not come up the hill seemed a great relief. I'm sick of questions and curiosity of my doings, I suppose, he thought. What an inquisitive lot they were. He'd have to mind to go and ask the gaffer who the inquirer was, but he thought, better or worse of it, he turned and walked quickly back to Bag End. Pippin was sitting in his pack in the porch. Sam was not there. Frodo stepped inside into the dark door. Sam? He called. Sam, time! I'm coming, sir, came the answer, far from within. Followed soon by Sam himself, wiping his mouth. He had said some well to the beer barrel in the cellar. All aboard, Sam? Yes, sir. I'll last for a bit now, sir. Frodo shut and locked the door and gave the key to Sam. Run this down to your home, Sam, and then cut along the road and meet us as quick as you can to the gate in the showers. We're not going to go through the village tonight. Too many ears priking and ears prying. Sam ran off at full speed. Now we're off at last, said Frodo. They shouldered their packs and took up their sticks and walked back around the corner, west of Bag End. Goodbye, said Frodo, looking at last the dark black windows. He waved his hand, then turned and following Bilbo, if he had known it, hurrying after Peregrine down the garden path. They jumped over the low place in the hedge at the bottom and took to the fields, passing into the darkness like a rustle in the grasses. At the bottom of the hill on its western side, when they came to the gate opening to the narrow lanes, and there they halted and adjusted their straps of their packs. Presently, Sam appeared, trotting quickly and breathing hard. His heavy pack was hoisted high above his shoulders, and he put his head in a tall, shapeless felt bag, which he called a hat. In the gloom, he looked very much like a dwarf. I am sure you have given me all the heaviest stuff, said Frodo. I pity snails and all that carry their homes on their backs. I could take a lot more yet, sir. My pack is quite light, said Sam stoutly and untruthfully. No, you don't, Sam, said Pippin. It is good for him. He's got nothing except what he ordered us to pack. He's been slack lately, and you'll feel the weight less when he's walked off of his own. Be kind to a poor old hobbit, laughed Frodo. I shall be as thin as a willow wand, I'm sure, before I get to Buckland. But I was talking nonsense. I suspect you have taken in more than your share, Sam. I shall look into it at our next packing. He picked up his stick. Heck again. Well, we're all walking in the dark, so let's put some miles behind us before bed. For a short way they followed the lane westwards, then leaving it again, Then leaving it, they turned left and took quietly to the fields again. They were in single file along the hedgerows and borders of the coppices, and night fell dark about them. In their magic cloaks they were invisible, as if they had magic rings. Since they were all hobbits and were all trying to be silent, they made no noise that even hobbits could hear. Even the wild things in the field and woods hardly noticed their passing. After some time they passed the water in West Hobbiton by a narrow plank bridge. All right, up around 2 caffeine. The stream was there no more than a whiting black ribbon, bordered with winding elder trees. A mile or two further south, they hastily crossed the great road from the Brandywine Bridge. They are now in Tukeland and bending southwards. They made for the Green Hill country. As they began to climb its slopes, they looked back and saw lamps in Hobbiton far off twinkling in the gentle valley of the water. Soon it disappeared into the folds of the darkness of the darkened land, and followed by Wavewater beside its great pool. When the light of the last farm was far behind, peeping among the trees, Frodo turned and waved a single farewell. I wonder if I shall look down into the valley again, he said quietly. When they had walked for about 3 hours, they rested. The night was clear and cool and starry, but smoke-like wisps of mist were creeping up on the hillsides. Through the streams and deep meadows, thin clawed birches swaying in a light wind above their heads made a black net against the blue sky. They ate a very frugal supper for hobbits, and they went on again. Soon they struck a narrow road, and then rolled up and down, fading gray into darkness ahead. The road to Woodhall and Stock, and then to Bucklebury Ferry. It climbed away from the main road in the Water Valley, and wound over the skirts of the green hills toward Woody End, a well corner of Eastern Faring. After a while, they plunged into a deep cloven track between fallen trees that rustled their dry leaves at night. It was dark. At first they talked and hummed a tune softly together, being now far away from the inquisitive ears. Then they marched in silence, and Pippin began to lag behind. At last they began to climb a steep slope, and he stopped and yawned. I'm so sleepy, he said. That soon till I fall down on the road. Are you going to sleep on your legs? It's nearly midnight. I thought you liked walking in the dark, said Frodo. But there is no great hurry. Mary expects us sometime the day after tomorrow, but that leaves us nearly 2 days more. We shall halt at the first likely spot. His round eyes were open, for he was looking across the lands. All likely spot. Okay, I did it again. I jumped some pages again. No. The wind's in the west, said Sim. If we get on the other side of this hill, we shall find a spot that is sheltered and snug enough, sir. There's a dry firewood just ahead, if I remember rightly. Sam knew the land well within the 20 miles of Hobbiton, but there was a limit of his geography. That was the limit of his geography. Just before the top of the hill, they came on the patch of the firwood. Leaving the road, they went down to the deep, represented darkness of the trees and gathered dead sticks and cones to make a fire. Soon they made a merry crackle of flame at the foot of a larger fir tree and sat around for a while until they began to nod. Then, each in an angle of the great tree's roots, they curled up in their cloths and blankets and were soon fast asleep. They set no watch. Even Frodo feared no danger yet. They were still in the fear of the and they were still in the heart of the Shire. A few creatures came and looked at them when the fire had died away. A fox passing through the river on business of his own stopped several minutes and sniffed. Hobbits, he thought. Well, what's next? I've heard of strange doings in this land, but I have suddenly heard of a hobbit sleeping at the doors outdoors under a tree. 3 of them. That is something mighty queer behind this. He was quite right, but he never found out any more than that. The morning came in pale and clammy. Frodo woke up first and found that a tree root had made a hole in his back and that his neck was stiff. Walking for pleasure. Why didn't I drive? He thought. I usually did at the beginning of an expedition, and all of my feather beds are sold to Saxonville Baggins. These tree roots would do them good. He stretched. Wake up, hobbits, he cried. It's a beautiful morning. Ah, what's beautiful about it, said Pippin, peering over the edge of his blanket with one eye. Sam, get breakfast ready for 9:30. Have you got bathwater or hot? Sam jumped. No, sir, I haven't, sir. Frodo stripped the blankets from Pippin and rolled him over, and then walked off to the edge of the wood. Away eastward, the sun was rising red out of the mists that lay thick on the world, touched with golden red. The autumn trees seemed to be sailing in rootless in a shadowy sea. A little below him, to the left side of the road, ran down steeply into the hollow and disappeared. When he returned, Sam and Pippin had gotten a good fire going. Water, shouted Pippin. Where's the water? I don't keep water in my pockets. Naked, said Frodo. We thought you were gone to find some, said Pippin. Busy setting out food, cups. You better go get. Oh, now. You can come too, said Frodo, and bring all the water bottles. There was a stream at the foot of the hill. They filled their bottles in the small camping kettle at a little fall where the water fell, a few feet over the an outcrop of gray stone. It was icy cold, and they spluttered as much and puffed as they bathed with their faces and hands. When their breakfast was over and their packs were tossed up again, it was after 10 o'clock, and the day was beginning to turn fine and hot. Oh, almost like today, almost. I would love it if the weather did not go above a certain temperature. They went down the slope and across the stream where it dived under the road, out and up the next slope, up and down another shoulder of hills, and by that time their cloaks, blankets, water, food, and other gear had already seemingly had a burden. The day's march promised to be warm and tiring work. After some miles, however, the road ceased to roll up and down. It climbed to the top of a steep bank in a weary, zigzagging sort of way, then prepared to go down for a last time. In front of them, they saw the lower lands, dotted with small clumps of trees that melted away in the distance to a brown woodland haze. They were looking across the woody end towards the Brandy Run River. The road turned away before them like a piece of string. The road goes on forever, said Pippin. Ah, but I can't without a rest. It's high time for lunch. He sat down at the bank of the side of the road and looked away east to the haze, beyond which lay the river, and at the inn by the Shire in which he had spent all his life. Sam stood beside him, his round eyes were wide open, for he was looking across the lands he had never seen into a new horizon. Do elves live in these woods? He asked. Not that I have heard, said Pippin. Frodo was silent. He too was gazing eastward along the road, as if he had never seen it before. Suddenly he spoke aloud, but as if to himself, saying slowly, the road goes on and on, ever on. Down from the door where it began, now far ahead the road has gone. If I must, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with weary feet until it joins with some larger way, where many paths and errands meet. Whither then I cannot say. That sounds a bit like a little Bilbo's rhyming, said Pippin. Or is it one of your int- imitations? It doesn't sound altogether encouraging. I don't know, said Frodo. It came to me then as if I was making it up. But I maybe heard it long ago, certainly reminds me very much of Bilbo, at least the last years. Before he went away, he used to often say there was one road, and that was like a great river. Its springs were every doorstep, every path was in its tributaria? Huh. It's dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door, he used to say. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there is no knowing where you might be swept off to. Do you realize that this is the very path that goes through Mirkwood, and if you let it, it might take you to the Lonely Mountain, and even further to worse places? He used to say that on the path outside the front door of Bag End, especially after he had been on a long walk. Well, the road doesn't sweep me anywhere for an hour at least, said Pippin, unslinging his pack, and the others followed his example. Putting their packs against the bank with their legs up the road, after a rest they had a good lunch and then more rest. The sun was beginning to get low, and the light of the afternoon was in the land they went down the hill. So far they had not met a soul on the road. This way was not much used, being hardly fit for carts, and there was little traffic to the woody end. They had been jogging along for an hour or more when Sam stopped for a moment, as if listening. They were now on level ground, and the road after much winding lay straight ahead through grassy lands sprinkled with tall trees, outliners of the approaching woods. I can hear a pony or a horse coming along the road behind, said Sam. They looked behind, but the turn of the road prevented them from seeing far. I wonder if that is Gandalf coming after us, said Frodo. But even as he said it, he had a feeling it was not. A sudden desire to hide from the view of the rider came over him. It may not matter much, he said apologetically, but I would rather not be seen on the road by anyone. I am sick of my doings being noticed and discussed. And if it is Gandalf, he added as an afterthought, we can give him a little surprise to pay for him being so late. Out to pay him out for being so late. Let's get out of sight. The other two ran quickly to the left and down into a little hollow not far from the road. There they lay flat. Frodo hesitated for a second. Curiosity or something was struggling with his desire to hide. The sound of hooves was drawing nearer. Just in time, he threw himself down in a patch of long grass behind a tree that overshadowed the road. Then he lifted his head and peered cautiously above one of the great roots. Around the corner came a black horse. No hobbit pony, but a full-sized horse. And in it sat a large man who seemed to crouch in the saddle, wrapped in a great black cloak and hood, so that only his boots on his high stirrups had shown below. His face was shadowed and invisible. When it reached the tree and was level with Frodo, the horse stopped. The riding figure sat quiet until with its head bowed, as if listening. For inside the hood came a noise as if someone was sniffing the air to catch an elusive scent. The head turned side to side of the road. A sudden, unreasoning fear of discovery laid hold of Frodo. He thought of his ring. He hardly dared to breathe, yet the desire to get it out of his pocket and become so strong that he began to slowly move his hand. The advice of Gandalf seemed absurd. Bilbo used the ring, and I'm still in the Shire, he thought, as his hand touched the chain where it should hang. At that moment, the rider sat up and shook his reins. The horse stepped forward, walking slowly at first, then breaking into a quick trot. Frodo crawled to the edge of the road and watched for the rider until he dwindled into the distance. He could not be sure, but it seemed to him that suddenly, before it passed out of sight, the horse turned aside and went into the trees on the right. Well, I call that very queer, indeed very disturbing, said Frodo to himself as he walked towards his companions. Pippin and Sam had remained flat in the grass and had seen nothing, so Frodo described the rider and his strange behavior. I can't say why, but I felt certain he was looking or smelling for me. Also, I feel certain that I did not want him to discover me. I've never seen or felt anything like that in the Shire before. But what was one of the big people have to do with us? Said Pippin. And what is he doing in this part of the world? There are some men about, said Frodo, down in the South Ferry. They have had big they have had trouble with big people, I believe. But I have never heard of anything like this rider. I wonder where he comes from. Begging your pardon, put in Sam suddenly. I know where he comes from. It's from Hobbiton. That's the Black Rider that come. This here Black Rider comes, unless there's more than one, and I know where he's not going. Going to. What do you mean? Said Frodo sharply, looking to him in astonishment. Why didn't you speak up earlier? I only just remembered, sir. It was like this when I got back to the hole yesterday evening with the key. Any time. Dad said, send me. Hello, Sam. He said, I thought you were away with Mr. Frodo this morning. There's been a strange customer asking for Mr. Baggett, said Bag End. He's only just gone. I set him on to Buckleberry. Not that I like the sound of him. He seemed mighty put out when I told him Mr. Baggins had left his old home for good. He hissed at me, he did. It gave me quite a shudder. What a fellow he was. So I said to the Gaffer, I don't know, says he, but he wasn't a hobbit. He was tall and black-like and stood over me. I reckon he was one of the big folk from foreign parts. He spoke funny. I couldn't stay to hear more, sir. Since you were waiting, I didn't want to give much heed to it, and the Gaffer is still getting old and more than a bit blind, and it may have been near dark when this fellow came up the hill and found him and taking the air at the end of the row. I hope he has done no harm, so sir, no me. The Gaffer can't be blamed anyway, said Frodo. As a matter of fact, I heard him talking to the stranger who seemed to be inquiring me. I nearly went and asked him who it was, so I wish I had, or he had told me about it before. I might have been more careful on the road. Still, there is no more er, connection between this rider and Gandalf Stranger. And the Gaffer Stranger, said Pippin. We left Hobbiton secretly enough, and I don't see how he could have followed us. What about the smelling, sir? And the Gaffer said he was a black chap. I wish I had waited for Gandalf, Frodo muttered, but perhaps it had been only made matters worse. Then you know or guess something about this writer, said Pippin, who had caught the many words. I don't know, and I'd rather or not guess. All right, cousin Frodo, you can keep your secret for the present, if you want to be mysterious. In the meantime, what else are we to do? I would like to take a bite and a sup, but somehow I think we better move on from here. Your talk of sniffing riders with invisible noses has unsettled me. Yes, I think we will move on now, said Frodo. Oh, not on the road in case the rider comes back, for another follows. We ought to do a good step at Morb today, and Buckland is still miles away. The shadows of the trees were long and thin on the grass, and as they started off again, they kept a stone's throw to the left of the road, and kept out of sight as much as they could. But this hindered them, for the grass was thick and took Tasaki, and the ground uneven, and the tree began to draw together into the thickets. The sun had drawn red behind the hills in their backs, and evening was coming on before they had come back up to the road at the end of the long level over which it had run straight for miles. At that point, a bit left and went down into the lowlands of the Yale, making for Stock, but a lane branched right, winding through the wood of ancient oak trees on its way to Woodhall. That is the way for us, said Frodo. Not far from the road meeting, they came onto a huge hulk of a tree. It was still alive, and the leaves and the small branches that had put out rounded the broken stumps of its long fallen limbs. But it was hollow and could not be entered with a great crack. On the side away from the road, the hobbits crept inside and sat there on a floor of old leaves and decayed wood. They rested and had a light meal, talking quietly and listening from time to time. The twilight was about them as they crept up to the back of the far lane. The west wind was sighing in the branches. The leaves were whispering. Soon the road began to fall gently but steadily into dusk. A star came out above the trees in the darkening east before them. They went abreast and in step to keep up their spirits. After a time, the stars grew thicker and brighter. The feeling of disquiet left them, and they were no longer listening for the sounds of hooves, and they began to hum softly, as hobbits have a way of doing as they walk along, especially when they were drawing near to a home at night. With hobbits is a super song or a bed song, but these hobbits hummed a walking song, though not, of course, without any mention of upper, and bed. Bilbo Baggins had made the words to a tune that was as old as the hills, and he taught it to Frodo as they walked down the lanes of the Water Valley and talked about adventure. Upon the hearth a fire is red. Beneath the roof, if there is a bed, but not yet weary of on our feet. Still round the corner we still meet. A sudden tree or standing stone, oh, that none have seen but we alone. Tree and follow and leaf and grass, let them pass, let them pass. Hill and water under sky, pass them by, pass them by. Still round the corner there may be wait, a new road or a secret gate. And though we pass them by today, tomorrow we may be come this way, and we take the hidden paths that run towards the moon or towards the sun, apple, thorn, and nut and slow. Let them go, let them go. Sun and stone and pool and dwell. Fare ye well, fare ye well. Home is behind, the world is ahead, and there is many paths to tread. Through shadows to the edge of night, until the stars until the stars are all right. The world behind and the home ahead, we all wander back to the home in bed. Mist and twilight, cloud and shade, away still fade, away still fade. Fire and lamp and meat and bread, and then to bed, and then to bed. The song ended, and now to bed, and now to bed, said Pippin in a high voice. Hush, said Frodo. I think I hear hoofs again. Then they stopped suddenly and stood as silent as the tree's shadows listening. And there was sound of hoofs in the lane, some far behind, but coming slow and clear down the wind. Quickly and quietly they slipped off the path and ran into deep shade under the oaks. Don't let us get too far, said Frodo. I don't want to be seen. But I want to see if it's another Black Rider. Very well, said Pippin. But don't forget about the sniffing. The hoofs drew nearer, and they had no time to find a hiding place better than the general darkness under the trees. Sam and Pippin crouched behind a large tree hole. while Frodo crept back a few yards towards the lane. It showed a gray and pale line of the fading light through the wood. Above it, the stars were thick in the dim sky, but there was no moon. The sound of hooves stopped. As Frodo watched, he saw something dark pass across the light space between the two trees, then halt. It looked black, like the black shadow of a horse, led by a smaller black shadow. The black shadow stood close to the point where they had left the path, and it swayed from side to side. Frodo thought that he heard the sound of snuffling. The shadow bent to the ground and then began to crawl towards him. Once more, the desire to slip the ring came over Frodo, but this time it was stronger than before. So strong, almost before he realized what he was doing, his hand was groping his pocket. But the moment came, in there came a sound, like a mingled song and laughter. A clear voice rose and fell into the starlight. The black shadow straightened up and retreated. It climbed up onto its shadowy horse. It seemed to vanish across the lane into the darkness and on to the other side. Frodo breathed again. Elves, explained Harry in a whisper. Elves, sir! He would have burst out of the trees and dashed off to the voices if they had not pulled him back. Yes, it is the elves, said Frodo. One can meet them sometimes in the woody end, but they don't live in the Shire. But they wander onto it in spring and autumn, out their way of their own lands, away beyond the Tower Hills. I am thankful that they do. You did not see it, but that black lair stopped here and was actually crawling towards me when the song began. As soon as he cleared the voices, he slipped away. I heard the voices, he slipped away. What about the elves? Said Sam, too excitedly to trouble about the weather. Can't we go see them? Listen, they're coming this way, said Frodo. We only have to wait. The singing drawing nearer. One clear voice rose above the others. It was singing in the fair air, elven tongue, which Frodo knew only a little, and the others knew nothing. Yet the sound of blending with the melodies seemed to shape itself in their thought into the words which they only partly understood. This was the song as Frodo heard it. Snow white, O lady clear, O queen beyond the western seas, O light to us that's wandered here. Amid the world of woven trees is Garthonil Ilberith. Clear as their eyes and bright they breathe, Snow white, we sing to thee. In far land beyond the sea, O stars that are in the endless years, with shining hand by her were sworn, and the wind fields now bright and clear, we see your silver blossom bloom. O Albertha Gathona, we still remember, we who dwell in this far land beneath in the trees, thy sunlight on the western seas. The song ended. These are high elves. They spoke the name Elbereth, said Frodo in amazement. Few of the fairest folk I've ever seen in the Shire. Not many now remain on Middle Earth east of the Great Sea. This is indeed strange chance. The hobbits sat in shadow by the wayward. Before long, the elves came down the lane towards the valley. They passed slowly, and the hobbits could see the starlight glimmering on their hair and in their eyes. They bore no lights, yet they walked in a shimmer, like the light of the moon above the rim of the hills before it rises seemed to fall about their feet. They were now silent, and at last the elf passed. As the last elf passed, he turned and looked towards the hobbits and laughed. Hail, Frodo, he said. You're abroad late, or are you perhaps lost? Then he called aloud to the others, and the company stopped and gathered around. This is indeed wonderful, they said. 3 hobbits in a wood at night. We have not seen such a thing since Bilbo went away. What is the meaning of it? The meaning of it, my fair people, is simple. That we seem to be going the same way as you are. I like walking under the stars, but I welcome your company. But we have no need of of other company. And hobbits are so dull, they laughed. And how do you know that we go the same way as you? We do not know whether we are going. And how do you know my name? We know many things, they said. We have seen you often before with Bilbo, though you may not have seen us. Who are you? Who is your lord? Asked Frodo. I am Gildor, answered the elf leader, the elf who had first hailed him. Gildor are Inglorian of House Finrod. We are exiles, and most of our kindred have long ago departed. We too are now only tarrying here for a while, ere we return over the great sea. But some of our kinsfolk dwell still peace in Whitfrindell. Come now, Frodo, tell us what you are doing, and for we see that there is some shadow of fear about you. Oh, wise people, interrupted Pip, but tell us about the Black Riders. Black Riders, they said in low voices. Why do they ask about Black Riders? Because two Black Riders have overtaken us today. One has done so twice. One has done so twice, said Pippin. Only a little while ago he has slipped away as you drew near. The elves did not answer at once, but spoke together softly in their own tongue. At length, Gildor turned to the hobbits. We will not speak of this here, he said. We think that you're best to come with us. It is not our custom. It's not our custom, but for this time we shall take you on our road, and you shall lodge with us for tonight, if you will. O fair folk, this is good fortune beyond our hopes, said Pippin. Sam was speechless. I thank you indeed, Gildor, Glorians, said Fodor, bowing. El Silla Lumen in Element Omentilmo. A star shines in the hour of our meeting, he added to the high elf speech. Careful, friends, said Gildor, laughing. Speak no more secrets. Here is a scholar in the ancient tongue. Bilbo was a great master. Hail, help, friends, he said, bowing to Frodo. Come now, with your friends, and join our company. You had best walk in the middle so that you may not stray. You may be wary before we halt. Why, where are you going? For tonight we are going to the hills above Woodhall. It is some miles, but you shall have rest into the end of it, and it will shorten your journey tomorrow. They marched on again in silence, and passed like shadows and faint lights, for elves, even more than hobbits, could walk when they wished without sound or footfall. Pippin soon began to feel sleepy and staggered once or twice, but each time a tall elf at his side had put out his arm and saved him from the fall. Sam walked along at Frodo's side as if in a dream, with the expression of his face of half fear and half of outstanding joy. The woods on either side became denser. The trees were now younger and thicker. As the lane went lower, running down into a fold of the hills, there were many deep breaks of hazel on the rising slopes at either end. At last the elves turned aside from the path. A green ridge edge lay almost unseen through the thickets of the thickets on the right. And this they followed as it wound back and on the wooden slopes at the top of the shoulder of the hills that stood out into the lower land of the river valley. Suddenly they came out of the shadow of the trees. Before them lay a space of grass, gray under the night. One three sides the woods pressed onto it, but eastwards the ground fell steeply, and the tops of the dark trees growing at the bottom of the slope were below their feet. Beyond the low lands lay dim and flat beyond the stars. Nearer at the hand of few lights twinkled in the village of Woodhall. They all sat on the grass and spoke together in soft voices. They seemed to take no further notice of the hobbits. Frodo and his companions wrapped themselves in cloaks and blankets, and drowsiness stole over them. The night grew on, and the lights in the valley went out. Pippin fell asleep, pillowed on the green hillock. Away high in the east south Louis swung with Ermarth, the nether star, and slowly above the mist red Borgil rose, glowing like a jewel of fire. Then by some shift in the airs and the mist was drawn away like a veil, and there leaned up, as he climbed over the rim of the world, the swordsman of the sky, Menelvalgar, with his shining belt. The elves burst into song. Suddenly, under the trees, a fire sprang up with lead light. Come, the elves called to the hobbits. Come, now is time for speech and merriment. Pippin sat up and rubbed his eyes. He shivered. There is a fire in the hall, and food for hungry guests, said an elf standing before him. At the south end of the greenswood there was an opening, and the green floor ran into the wood and formed a wide space like a hall. Woofed by the boughs of the trees, their great trunks land like pillars down each side. In the middle there was a woodlight blazing. Upon the tree pillars, torches with lights of gold and silver were burning steadily. The elves sat around the fire upon a grass and upon the swell rings, old trunks. Some went to and fro, bearing cups and pouring drinks. Others brought up food in the heated plates and dishes. This is poor fare, they said to the hobbits, for we are lodging in the greenwood far from our halls. Even if you ever are our guests at home, we shall treat you better. It seems to me good enough for a birthday party, said Frodo. Pippin afterwards recalled a little of either food or drink, for his mind was filled with the light on the elf faces and the sound of voices so various and so beautiful that he felt like he was in a walking dream. But he remembered there was still bread surpassing the savor of a fair white loaf to one who was starving, and fruits sweet as willow berries and richer than the tender fruits of the gardens. He drained a cup and was filled with a fragment draught, as clear as a fountain. Sam could never describe his words, nor picture it clearly to himself. What he felt or thought that night, though, remained in his memory as the one chief event of his life. The nearest he ever got away was to say, "Well, sir, if I ever grow apples like that, I would call myself a gardener." But it was like singing, but it was the singing that went to my heart, if you know what I mean. Frodo sat, eating, drinking, and talking with delight, but his mind was chiefly on the words spoken. He knew little of the elf speech and listened eagerly. Now and again he spoke to those that served him and thanked them in their own language. They smiled and saw him laughing. Here's a jewel among the hobbits. After a while, Pippin fell asleep and was lifted up and borne away into a burrow under the trees. There he was laid upon a soft bed and slept for the rest of the night away. Sam refused to leave his master. When Pippin had gone, he came and sat curled up next to Frodo's feet, where at last he nodded and closed his eyes. Frodo remained long awake with Gildor. They spoke of many things, old and new, and Frodo questioned Gildor about the much happenings of the wide world outside the Shire. The tidings were mostly sad and ominous, of gatherings of darkness, the wars of men, and the flight of the elves. At last Frodo asked the questions that was meant to be his heart. Tell me, Gildor, have you ever seen Bilbo since he left? Gildor smiled. Yes, he answered, twice. He said farewell to us in this very spot, but I saw him once again far from here. You can say no more about Bilbo, and Frodo fell silent. You do not ask me or tell me much that concerns yourself, Frodo, but I already know a little, and I can read more in your face and in the thought behind your question. You are leaving the Shire, yet you doubt that you will find what you seek, or accomplish what you intend, or that you will return. Is not that so? It is, said Frodo. But I thought my going was a secret known to Gandalf and my faithful Sam. He looked down to Sam, who was snoring gently. The secret will not reach the enemy from us, said Gildor. The enemy? Then you know why I am leaving the Shire. I do not know for what reason the enemy is pursuing you, answered Gildor, but I perceive that it is strange though it seems to me, and I warn you the peril is now both before you and behind you, and upon either side. You mean the riders? I fear that they were servants of the enemy. What are the Black Gliders? Has Gandalf told you nothing? Nothing about the creatures. Then I think it is not for me to say more. At least terror should keep you from your journey. For it seems to me that you have only just only set out just in time. If you indeed are in time, you must make haste, and neither stay nor turn back, for the Shire is no longer of any protection. Can I imagine what information could be more terrifying than your hints and warnings, explained Frodo. I know the danger lay ahead, of course, but I do not expect to meet in your own Shire. Can a hobbit walk from water to river in peace? But it is not your own Shire, said Gildor. Others dwelt here before hobbits were, and others will dwell here well again when the hobbits are no more. The wide world is about you. You fence yourselves in, but you cannot ever fence it out. I know, and yet, always seemed so safe and so familiar. What can I do now? My plan was to leave the Shire secretly and maybe raid Rivendell. But now my footsteps are dogged before I even got to Buckland. I think you should not follow that plan. I think you should still follow that plan, said Gildor. I do not think the road will prove too hard for your courage. But if you desire clearer counsel, you should ask Gandalf. I do not know the reason for your flight, or and therefore I do not know what by means your pursuers will assail you. These things Gandalf must know, I suppose, that you will still see him before you leave the Shire. I hope so, but there's another thing that makes me anxious. I've been expecting Gandalf for many days. He was to have come to Hobbiton but at least 2 nights ago, but he has never appeared. Now I'm wondering what has happened to him. Should I wait for him? Gilderoy was silent for a moment. I do not like this news, he said at last. That Gandalf should be late and does not bode well. But it is said, do not meddle in the affairs of wizards, for they are subtle and quick to anger. The choice is yours. Go or wait. And it is also said, answered Frodo, go not to the elves for counsel, for they will say both no and yes. Yes, please don't go to me for counsel unless it's for tech issues. Indeed, Gilder, elves solemnly give unguarded advice, for advice is a dangerous gift, even for the wise to the wise, and all curses may work ill. But what would you? You have not told me all concerning yourself. Up and how then shall I choose better than you? But if you demand advice, I will for friendship's sake give it. I think you should go at once without delay, and if Gandalf does not come before you set out, then advise this: do not go alone. Take such friends as trusty and as willing. Now you should be grateful for not give this counsel gladly. The elves have their own labors and their own sorrows, and they are concerned with the ways of Hobbit. They are oh wait, that's probably like and they are a little concerned with the ways of hobbits. It's or of any creature upon earth. Our paths cross their seldom by chance or by purpose. In this meeting there may be more chance but the purpose is not clear to me. I fear to say too much. I am deeply grateful, said Frodo, but I wish you would tell me plainly what the Black Riders are. If I take your advice, I may not see Gandalf for a long while, and I ought to know what danger pursues me. It is not enough to know that they are the servants of the enemy, answered Gildor. Flee them, speak no words to them, they are deadly. Ask no more of me, my heart forbids that. Here is all ended, you friends, Frodo, son of Drago. Will know no more will know more of these things than Gildor Ilbrin. May Elbereth protect you. Where shall I find courage? Asked Frodo. That is what I chiefly need. Courage is found in unlikely places, said Gildor, but of great hope. Sleep now. In the morning we shall have gone. But we will send our message through the lands, so the wandering companions shall know of your journey, and those that have power for good shall be on watch. I know your name. I name you Elf Friend, and may the stars shine upon you on the end of your road. Seldom we have such delight in strangers. It is far it is fair to hear words of the ancient speech from the lips of other wanderers in the world. Frodo felt sleep coming upon him, even as Gildor finished speaking. I will sleep now, he said. Then the elf led him to a burrow beside Pippin, and he threw himself upon the bed and fell at once into a dreamless slumber. All right. We're going to call it here for tonight. I wish we could continue more. We are slowly making our way towards a good portion of the story. Well, actually, no. We're still pretty much. I feel like we're pretty much prologue at this point. Now you're really down here. There you are. I know you're streaming. All right.
We are going to go raid. Oh wow, that kind of rhymes. We're gonna go raid Late High Rolled. It is his first VTuber anniversary, so we're gonna give him all types of love that I know you bookworms are very good at. And then yeah. Bloop. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m. we are going to be playing some more Dragon Age. I don't know what we'll be doing for that per se. Might be doing some other DLC stuff. We might not be doing some other DLC stuff. I think we got like one DLC. No, we got one DLC thing to do, and then we got another thing we can. Actually, I do want to try that one side quest to see if I can finish off another one because I do have a side quest for somebody else to get done. So we'll see how that goes. And yeah, so I'll catch you all later.